sharing. Okay.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 2 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? On a Monday afternoon, and we come to you every Monday from 2 to 3. And we're here for another edition of All at allpointstv.com. And we're the program called What's Going On, and we are an hour program that comes on every Monday. Every second and fourth Mondays, our program is preceded by Black History Corner, Satura's Black History Corner. And that's starring the two all-stars here at allpointstv.com. That's Miss Catherine Hunter Williams and Miss Catherine Blake. And they come on the second and fourth Mondays and stay around for about 30 minutes, starting at 3:30. And they'll be here. Let's see, this is the third Monday. If it is, they'll be here next week. If not, they'll be here in 2 weeks.
Yeah, this is the third Monday. Yeah.
Third Monday. So we're glad to have you out there as always, and we hope you'll stay tuned for the next hour. We have some things we think you'll be interested in, and I'm looking forward to getting into it because I brought my books today. When I bring my books in the studio, that means that we're going to be talking about some documentation. And I want you to tune in also for an article I've been doing for the last 2 days now. This is the third day, and I'm going to be doing part 3 on a series of 4 articles altogether. Finish it up tomorrow, and I'm calling it, this is my most controversial series, and I'm talking here about the T word. And the T word is treason. Because I think what we have entered into in this country at this time is something that amounts to what the framers, I think that they were really trying to nail down, of all the boards they were trying to nail down, they were trying to nail down the government itself becoming treasonous toward the country and toward the American people. And that's why I think they put in Article 2, Section 4. I don't think it's found anywhere else, but in Article 2, Section 4, the word treason is mentioned in the Constitution when it says that the president, the vice president, and then it says in all civil officers of the United States. That pretty much entails all of the federal office holders that are elected to the federal government or appointed by someone in the federal government. Those positions that they have, those official positions, make them civil officers of the United States. And so it says the president, and they're naming him as a civil officer, as you can see when you get to the rest of the language in Article 2, Section 4.
Can I ask a question, answer here though? Could you kind of qualify what constitute as a treason? Because I've been told, because I don't like the president, and I speak out against his policies, that I'm engaging in an act of treason, and that's what a lot of liberals are trying to pass off now as treasonous. If you don't agree with them and the president, you're treasonous. And I don't see how that's actually falls. But if you could, I think that's going to be clarified. Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that question because the way it's defined in the College Standard Dictionary, the word treason is to take your legal allegiance to a government entity or to a sovereign, the way it's defined in the dictionary, and you take that allegiance and you place it somewhere else where the allegiance where it's placed is countermanding the allegiance that is in fact required under the statutory claims. The law says, for example, that I am a citizen of the United States. Those who are born or naturalized in this country are citizens of this country. That's in Amendment 14. Therefore, if I then, as a citizen of this country, do things to countermand that and work against that allegiance by being in some other arrangement that challenges that allegiance, then that would be a cause for treason. That is, say that you are sabotaging the interests of your nation that you are supposed to have an allegiance to, and you are in fact placing the allegiance elsewhere that hurts the allegiance that you should have for your own country, for example. And so therefore the injury is that you are working with other vested interests against the interests of your own nation. Or if you were in a king, where you have a king, then it'll be against the sovereign. It'll be against the sovereignty of the ruler. That would be a treasonous event as well. So when they say treason, they're saying you're working against the interests of the national interest of the country, and that you're actually sabotaging that interest, and you are involved in countermanding it by your actions and serving another entity that is in opposition to the standing that you would have if you were in fact standing along with the country in which you have those citizenship claims. Benedict Arnold, for example, before the war was over in the Revolutionary War, was involved in treason in terms of the fact that they had declared the independence from the British. Now, under the British Crown, when they were not claiming to be standing against the British Crown, then what Benedict Arnold did and would have done under those premises would have been quite okay. But when they stood up against the king, and they're in that room in Philadelphia on July the 2nd, and they're bringing up and drawing up the Declaration of Independence, which will be signed 2 days later on July the 4th, 1776, they're in that room and they are involved in treasonous behavior, and they know they're involved in treasonous behavior because now what they're doing is they're standing against the king, and they are saying that they're going to flout the authority of the sovereign, and that becomes a treasonous event. But that's also based upon whether or not they can stand up and win the war that's going to break out, because that's going to come down to which side comes out at the end and prevails. And it took 7 years where it's going tit for tat, and we don't know how it's going to come out until 1783, when the British, which were preoccupied with other things that were going on, and they weren't just having to deal with the colonies, they had to deal with France also, and they had other interests in other parts of the world, so they had to deal with that as well. And they couldn't put their full attention upon what was happening in the 13 colonies. And because they sent their secondary army over here, then George Washington, who was not a second-rate general, but a first-rate general, one of the great generals in history, was able to prevail. And therefore, that which was treasonous, given the outcome, was now Benedict Arnold, who was actually in allegiance at some point with the British, but having worked for a while within the confines of the revolutionary struggle, when he betrayed that and then they prevailed, then he's of course involved in treasonous behavior based upon the prevailing force. If he had won, Benedict Arnold would have been hailed as a hero over there in Britain. And over in Britain, he may well have been a hero, because that's where he went once his treasonous behavior was clear. I mean, he was fighting on the side of George Washington, was one of the confidants in the Revolutionary Army, but he got mad because he didn't get the privilege that he thought he should have gotten, didn't get the commanding position he wanted, and he began to object to that, and he changed sides. That's fine, provided that the side you changed to prevails, but it did not prevail, and that's why he dies in Britain. If he had come here, he would have been involved in treasonous conduct. You see, you stand up right now. I think this might have been, this goes back to 1892, and I think it's when they put under God in it in 1952. But the Pledge of Allegiance says, "I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the Republic," because that's Article 4, where every government, every state government, is guaranteed a Republican form of government. So then it says, "I pledge allegiance to the flag." All nations have flags. "And to the Republic for which the flag stands. Of course, it doesn't say flag, it says, and to the republic which it stands. And so you're taking allegiance to the flag. In fact, you don't work in government positions without pledging allegiance to the flag through the Constitution. The president takes it also in oath of office. In Article 2, the 35 words, he is in fact installed, he cannot be inaugurated into office until he takes those 35 words. And he can either swear to it or he can affirm it. If there's some religious objection to swearing, then he can affirm. But he must take that oath because the allegiance must be clarified.
But you notice that we switched it with the Pledge of Allegiance in the schools and stuff like that now. You just mentioned it just maybe congealed with what I've been thinking for years. The oath of office and the willingness and the desire to express that you're going to follow the Constitution is more incumbent upon the elected leaders rather than just the average citizen. And see what that is, because those who are, they should know what it entails when they're running for office, when they're going to swear in for office. Where see when you got this allegiance being put upon the regular average person, it's almost like a noose around our necks, because they're going to use that. Like I said, they already say, if you oppose us, you're treasonous. Mm-hmm. If you have a question about what we're doing or don't think we're doing the best thing, that's considered treasonous. So basically, they're taking the average person's sensibility and use it as a weapon against them. Mm-hmm. When those who are actually swearing allegiance to to follow this law that they're supposed to, and the rules of the Constitution, the rule of law basically established by the Constitution, mm-hmm. they're trying to use it as basically a bludgeon against or a noose around our necks. Mm-hmm. Whereas they skirt around that and fly and are just so arrogantly and flippantly violating their own oath.
The confusion is the Pledge of Allegiance is not to the politicians. The pledge is to the rule of law under the Constitution of the United States. That's why they have to take the oath that they will uphold the Constitution. We're not taking the oath to uphold the politicians who are taking the oath to uphold the Constitution. And what they're talking about, John, is dissension. They think they're trying to put in the notion that any dissent from what they're doing is in fact treasonous, because the shift that they're trying to bring about is that if we dissent from what government is doing, somehow that is being involved in treasonous behavior against the country. That may well be the case in dictatorships where the state is housed within the personality of the ruler. In Kim Jong-un's North Korea, for example, anyone that dissents against Kim Jong-un is in fact guilty of treason because he is a state. You heard that when Louis XIV said, as the Sun King said, "I am the state," and that's true because allegiance is to the state or to the sovereign. And if the sovereign is a state, then any failure to adhere to the person that's in the power center at that point that rules that country, any dissent, you're risking your life in dissenting, because dissenting in those places is synonymous with treason. And that's why the death penalty is swift, sometimes right on the scene. Saddam Hussein is a good example of that. One person disagreed with him at the table, and he told the person, "Come in another room and let's talk about this." And went in another room and shot him, and came back and sat down. But see, what happens here is that because dissent is in fact written into the Constitution, that's what the First Amendment is about, the freedom of speech, to in fact give speech that is unpopular, may be unpopular to those who are in power. But because the Constitution upholds that, you're not being treasonous in terms of having a dissenting voice. In fact, the dissenting voice is the constitutional protection that you have in a republic. I'm going to be writing on this, as a matter of fact, in tomorrow's post. Now, today I'm doing something different in terms of looking at the issue of treason. I'm going to be writing it from the standpoint of what the government is doing in terms of the treason to the state. But I'm going to open up some new areas of understanding of that in terms of part 4 tomorrow, when I'm going to show there's a different kind of treason that happens in a Republican form of government. Because you see, there's not only a treason that happens in terms of the treason toward the state, but in a Republican form of government, there's also a treason that happens to we the people. Because you see, in a Republican form of government, the government can be involved in a treasonous behavior, even if it is not involved in doing something that is untoward its responsibilities toward the nation itself. For example, doing some things outside the nation, that maybe the agreement we have with Iran, for example. You can make some agreements out there that hurt the interests of the country, and that can amount to a treasonous event. But it can also be the fact that there are certain things they're doing and subverting the Constitution, where that becomes treasonous also, because you see, the treason is against, in the Republican form of government, is against we the people of the United States. So government can do some things within the confines of the country that's treasonous, because the people are the ones that are in charge, with given the power they have given to the government and loaned to the government, which allows the government to act in their name so they can have greater protection of their rights through this umbrella they set up for that particular purpose. But when it goes beyond that purpose and does some things untoward and purposes that it goes into of his own making, then that can become treasonous also, in terms of that which is delegated to them that they defy. That's what Judge Napolitano is talking about in his book called "It is Dangerous to Be Right When the Government is Wrong."
We've heard the expression before, if you really want to be taken as a nutcase immediately, just start talking about the Constitution. And the people just roll their eyes. I mean, I had a friend that did that, and I got to admit, back 20-some years ago, I had a friend who was a diehard constitutionalist, 25, 26 years ago. And every time he brought it up, he was the guy I worked with. This is against the Constitution. He'd bring out his, pocket one, and I'd even roll my eyes. Oh yeah, but that's not the way to go. And the thing is, both points are really valid, because yes, it is the Constitution, but we have allowed these people in power, that we put in power, to run amok. And it's because we are so concerned about not wanting to step out and say this is wrong, that because we don't want to be labeled as, oh, that nut job again. That's what it is. We're afraid we're going to let this liberty go because we don't want to be labeled.
Yeah, John, they had that was a situation they had where one person was on one of the major university campuses, and he was reading from this document. And these were, these are the scholars, these are future leaders of America, these well-rounded, experts, the intelligentsia in the future. And he's reading from this document, and the people were saying, my goodness, this is subversive. What is that? They thought I was reading from Karl Marx's The Communist Manifesto. And the guy was reading from the Bill of Rights. And so, in a way, what you're looking at is that the expression and taking hold of our rights in the Constitution, that's become subversive. There was a book by Weingartner, the book by, was it Weingartner that wrote the book? Yeah, he was one of the writers. I can't think of the other one's name right now. But the book was called Teaching as a Subversive Activity. Now, teaching is supposed to be you go in there and you teach the facts, and that's your job to do that. You import information. So how does teaching the facts become a subversive activity? Well, there's a book that I brought to the studio. It's called Lies, L-I-E-S, Lies My Teacher Told Me. Everything your American history textbook got wrong. And it's written by James Lowen, who's written several books along this line right here. And he's making some very good arguments in this book that if you go in the classroom and you teach that which is not orthodox, some of which we're seeing play out right now in terms of all this flag stuff that's taking place around South Carolina. And the people don't know what they're doing down there. The people in Columbia right now, they got one side over there hollering, they don't know anything. The other side over there, they're hollering, they don't know anything either. And both sides are hollering at each other about the flag, and they want to act like they are the Taliban. Really, they act like ISIS. Want to talk about, they even got the NAACP talking about taking down, they want these images off of Mount Rushmore. That's how crazy the dialogue has gotten. And they don't understand that you have in this country, and of course when the Klan was it wasn't a Klan, people riding with on their trucks had the so-called Confederate flag on their trucks, and they were riding through the community, and there are people out there hollering at them, talking about they were racist, throwing rocks at the trucks, and hollering about they're the Klan. They're not the Klan. You're the Klan. They have the right to that expression.
See, I don't understand this. I grew up in the North. My mom's family were immigrants, and they got harassed by largely people from the South when they came up here. My mom didn't like the Confederate flag when I was growing up. She said stuff about it. Okay, but as I got older, I just said, okay. I mean, my dad's family fought in the Civil War. His family, raised up from units. They raised up around this area, Genesee County, and I don't have this animosity towards the South like that. I mean, that's their heritage. I mean, they want to call that racism. Then everybody's okay. You can't eradicate it, but the way you emphasize, the way you make it a problem, is to keep on putting the light on and saying, "Look how bad these people are." You're labeling everybody with you're painting with a broad brush, and then you wonder why they're going to react to somehow. Basically, everybody's just got to go along with what somebody else in power says currently. No dissension allowed. I mean, I thought America's supposed to be a diversity. I guess it's diversity as long as you have different skin colors, but you got to be in lockstep with each other on the ideas.
We're in a very dangerous place.
Yeah, very dangerous.
Because any speech that's unpopular is now looked at as being, I don't want to use the word treason in all of these cases, but it's objectionable, and the objection is looked at as being unconstitutional. I mean, the speech itself they're objecting to is looked at as being unconstitutional speech, when really that is the speech the Constitution seeks to protect. You don't have to protect popular speech. Anyone that is speaking from a place where there's a validation by the majority, then you don't need to protect that speech because the majority agrees with you. It is the minority voice, the one that is the unpopular voice, that must be protected, because otherwise you have the majority becoming dictatorial toward the minority voice. And that's why the Constitution put in there, why the framers put in there in the Constitution, that in the very first amendment, it wasn't number 5, it wasn't number 10, they put it at the very beginning of the Bill of Rights, meaning it's primary there.
I'd like to know this.
Primary place in the Constitution.
A few years and years ago, about 30 years ago, Skokie, Illinois was a site where the Nazis were marching through. Skokie's predominantly a Jewish community, outside of Chicago there. Anyway, the ACLU had members that actually stepped forward and actually defended the right for the Nazis to march through Skokie. Okay, that was basically slap in the face of the people. I can see that. But the thing is, I don't understand this. I mean, I see things every day that offend my sensibilities. I just roll with it. I just go, I don't participate in it. I don't think this way, but I'm not going to dwell on that but it's like these liberals or progressives have such an insensitivity to everything that they're not rational thinkers. They're making an issue out of everything. They're exhausting, and they're not being very selective on their battles. They're doing everything. How can I say? They're doing everything counter to being an intelligent person. Yet they pride themselves on being more intelligent on those who oppose them. But they're really not that more intelligent. They're basically, there's got to be a lot of flexibility in life. I mean, there's a lot of things I see every day that bothers me. But it would bother me if I just let it go through the skin. But these people, I mean, they take everything and make it so horrific offense. And everybody's supposed to, it's like a knee-jerk, childlike mentality they have. They don't like this. I don't want anybody to do that. Okay, we don't want you to be upset. I mean, how long are we going to have to cater to these people's demands? Yeah,
John, we're seeing it. It's almost on all cylinders right now, and that's what's so endangering about it. You take, let me give you one example in terms of the event that happened in Tennessee. Look in Chattanooga. I was watching some of the commentators on, MSNBC, the LSD station, and we have a clear idea of the motivation of this guy who, Abdul Aziz, who went to 2 different military recruitment centers, military centers, people that protect the country are at those centers, those person recruiting for the defense of the nation. And this person goes there, tries to get to the first site, and was repelled by the barriers that were there, didn't do any of the carnage there, tried to, but drove some miles away and ended up killing, at first it was 4, wounded some others, and then there was a 5th person that died, a sailor died, days later after the shooting had occurred. And they're on MSNBC, and the lady, I can't think of her name, but I see her, I don't watch it all that often, so I don't know them quite as well. And she's asking these persons that's coming upon this, was he known to be a hunter? Did he ever have did he ever have any guns he was using, like going hunting? They're trying to turn it into a gun issue because they don't want to make it into an issue of what this event was about. And we all know what this is about. This was another expression of jihad in America. Now, jihad as an idea, I don't think you can do anything to stop constitutionally a person's right to have an idea. But in terms of its violent expression, that interferes with the rights of the other person, and that's not protected. I don't even think that the incitement to violence is protected because it interferes with the right of the person to be protected from the violence. So that would be kind of like a thin line between those two. But the minority speech has to be protected because the majority would crush speech it disagrees with. And then you don't have a Republican form of government. You have a dictatorship because you have a dictatorship by the majority that crushes the minority view and does not allow dissent from it. You have to have, in a Republican form of government, the right to dissent. And the framers did that at the very beginning of the Bill of Rights. At the very outset, they set up to say you have the freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom to assemble, and the freedom to petition the government, and freedom of religion. Why would you have the right to petition the government? Because you might disagree with the government, and the government does not hear your voice and does not know your voice. And so you have to let the government know that you object to what the government is doing because the government is acting in your name, and the government is entitled not to suppress that speech, but to respond to that speech. Because that speech lets the government know how you feel about what the government is doing. Because the government is acting in your name, according to Article 4 of the Constitution. That cannot be treasonous behavior, because you're not taking a pledge to the governing forces, the people there. Because what do? They take a pledge themselves. We all are taking a pledge. The pledge is to understand the rule of law under which this nation sits. We're all under the law. And so even if it was a pledge of allegiance to the leaders, they would not have to take a pledge of allegiance into office. I mean, do you think that Kim Jong-un was sworn into office? His daddy died and gave the country to it.
Well, do you think Raul Castro had any kind of No, basically his brother just handed him a country. Isn't that right? These people who rail, the communists who rail against privilege and against kingships and the arrogance coming from being the elite, basically do everything they accuse the kingships and the emperors of doing. They do the same bloody thing. Yeah.
I mean, after Louis XIV, who do you think was going to be the next ruler? Louis XV.
Well, look, that's why it's coming here in this area, though. You got to kill the in power now as a congressman. His uncle held up his reins. Look at the Dingles. his father held it for all through the, he was there at the implementation of the, the Social Security Act back during FDR's administration. John Dingell, who's now retired, but he's held it for 50 years or something like that, close to it. Now his wife's got it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to top out over 100 years eventually. Real quickly.
Very quickly, because Dingell was in there 58 years.
His dad was
there 29 years.
Yeah. So I mean, oh my God.
Now his wife, now John Dingell Jr.'s wife has the post. And so that phenomenon, series continues.
Well, you see what it does, though, save money on monogramming, I guess. If they got towels there, at least, they got the same last name, Yeah, to me, it's just, and people, and the stupid people, they should say, that family's, how much more currency can they have?
I think we have to also understand that because we do not have a monarchical form of government, we have to, therefore, make sure that we protect the republic from the monarchical claims. And you have these claims that are made by people that continue to run for office and won't leave. Well, that was not intended.
Well, the Roman Catholic Church banned the idea of having married priests because they didn't want it to become an inherited title, and the church property is going into the hands of these families. Okay, I think that's a page from a very flawed church. I think we could probably take from being a good idea. We should I don't like banning, but it's something that should be examined. They should not, let's face it, the Clintons have basically become a legacy family. The Kennedys have been. FDR's family, if they ever have resurrected or had somebody now who still and has that name, there's going to be a shoo-in, especially for the Democrats. Mm-hmm. So, at some point, we got to say, why don't we just abolish the idea of a constitutional democracy and just give it over to some basically it's merging to be like some kind of European kind of monarchy.
We're close to that.
Aristocracy.
We have in one party Clinton running, and we had William Jefferson Clinton, who was elected in 1992 and was president from 1993 to 2001. And we had the two Bushes, Bush one in 1988, George Herbert Walker Bush from 1988 to 1992. We had George W. Bush from 2001 to 2009. And then we have Jeb Bush running in 2016. What are we going to do about the fact that we are a Republican form of government, where we don't have to have the installation of a family ruling this country and having aristocracy over the country? We have another way of doing our business in this country, and that line is being blurred by these persons that are running underneath the radar. But what they're doing here really is something quite close to what you're seeing going on elsewhere. We have a choice here, though, and we got to make some fundamental claims within the reaches of our voices, our vote, and make the claim upon this republic. It's not going to stand if we continue to surrender to those that have other things in mind that they want to bring about, because we are on F.A. Hyatt road to serfdom in this country. He wrote about that in 44 Roosevelt, because he saw that during the Roosevelt administration when Roosevelt got in there in 1933, and Roosevelt wouldn't leave office.
I love the Democrats go on, and rightly so, about the Bushes. My God, not another Bush. What more? Yeah, what country we're going to be sent to war for now? Okay, but then we turn around and they say nothing, absolutely crickets. Going here when they talk about the Clintons. Mm-hmm. Let's face it. Bill Clinton gets credit for a lot of stuff he didn't really do single-handedly, and that's with every president, good or bad. He doesn't do it single-handedly. There's a lot of people, things in place he got to work with. So I'd love to preface that way. But come on. This idea that the Clintons are exempt from any kind of accusation of basically trying to establish a monarchy or some kind of royal family. Their daughter Chelsea has already said she wishes to run in the future.
Yes, if we do not have an aristocracy in place, and we're all equally under the law, then the question is, when the law is in fact violated, and we're talking here about the ultimate law of the country, which is the Constitution, do they go to jail when they violate it? Because the standard is, do we put in place prohibitions, which are already there, And when those prohibitions, those lines of demarcation are in fact crossed, do we then bring about the penalty? And if we do not, then that speaks to another standard. The standard is not found in Article 4. And when that standard is breached, then Article 2, Section 4 should kick in. And it says the president, you see, even the president has to abide by it. And if the president has to abide by it, the person is underneath him, there's one heartbeat away from his position, he must abide by it also. So the president and also the vice president. And then it says, in all civil officers, but then these are the civil officers of the United States. Now, that does not mean anything about taking anyone out of power in the states. They have to have their own document to bring that about. But the documents you read in the state level, because they are guaranteed in Article 4 a Republican form of government, then the states then have to then look at the Constitution underneath that, then draw up doctrines that are congruent and consistent with the claims in the Constitution, and they draw up a similar document. So in each state, there's also a clause in which they can impeach on the state level, but the federal government does not have that authority there. You see, it says, in all civil officers of the United States. Let's talk about the federal officers. And they shall be removed from office upon, and that word upon means upon impeachment for, in the House, which is in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, in the House of Representatives, where that's the process where it starts. So those of us who have set out here, we cannot bring about impeachment, because it says in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, the House shall have the sole power, S-O-L-E, not S-O-U-L, the sole power, meaning the only power to bring about impeachment on the federal level. You do that through your representatives. And if they do not hear your voice, then every 2 years, we can speak to them as well. We get them to do what we want them to do. And if they fail to do that, they answer to the people every 2 years, because that's our body. The House of Representatives is our body, our elected body.
By the way, I would like to remind people, a few years ago, Jeff Feingold, and John McCain both introduced legislation to have it passed. It was worded that if you wanted to write your senator and congressman, you would first have to register as a lobbyist. As a constituent, you couldn't write. They didn't want. Basically, they were saying that was a basic oversight, or that extreme measure would only, that wasn't the intention. But the way it was worded, it could be construed as that.
Yes.
So remember, I don't buy their. I think they want us to be shut up.
Oh yes,
especially McCain.
John, they're hidden dictators. When you have people that go to Washington and will not leave, that was not the intention. You can see that in Article 1. In Article 1, it says that the Congress, which is set up by Article 1, shall meet at least once a year. If that does not show you the intention of the framers in terms of the relevance of the Congress of the United States, they didn't intend for these guys to be sitting up there in Washington the whole year. They were farmers at this point. And so the idea that you're going to just sit up there, you've got your crops out there that got to be brought in, and you have other things to do. This is not your full-time job. This is a part-time position. The idea is that you legislate, get things done in behalf of the nation's interests, and you go home. And then if your term is over, you don't sit there forever. Some of those guys have been there 25 and 30 years, and I'll tell you this, every last one of them. If they've been there 20 and 25 and 30 years, these persons are hidden dictators.
See, Michigan seems to be a place to attract those. Conyers has been in power how long?
Ever since 72, I think it was.
Oh, I mean, and let's see. Then we got the Dingles we've already alluded to. We have the Kildees. Same way, he was Dale Kildee was in power for 32 years.
Mm-hmm. The family names.
I mean, well, because I think a lot of it is because the union support, because they were Democrats, it just kept them in power. They floated. Even if they weren't even measured by anything they did, legislation they passed or anything else, is because they're Democrats and the union backed them. The unions backed them. I think that's got to be the case.
John, you're making some great points. We have to understand how subtle this takeover is, how subversive it is, meaning that it's underneath the surface, but the intent is, I think Hyatt was very much cognizant of this fact. I mean, when this book came out in 1944 called The Road to Serfdom, and there's another book that kind of bases itself upon what Hyatt was writing about, when the book is called The Road to Tyranny. It's the same premise. But that book comes out in 1944 by Frederick Hyatt because he looked at the Roosevelt administration. And Flynn's book called The Myth of Roosevelt, or the book by Folsom over there at Hillsdale College, very good book on Roosevelt, the Roosevelt, the myth of Roosevelt. But they looked at Roosevelt in terms of, you go in, you go to the White House, you do your job, you respect the president of the nation. The precedent was you serve in the name of the founding president, who had enough respect for the rule of law, and also for the republic, that you didn't have to tell him to leave. George Washington was our greatest president, and his greatness was that he was not drunk with power. He went there and served 2 terms. Could have been a king, by the way, because of his popularity. George Washington's the only president we've had that was elected unanimously in each of his two elections. 1789, and again in the, well, you know, it's elected in 1789. I said 89. 88 would have been the election year when they ratified the Constitution, and then he ran a second time, and he was elected unanimously the second time as well. That has never happened since that point. Well, look at the power that gives him, where you got unanimity in terms of his going into office, where there's no opposition to it, because they knew this was something different in the world at this time. George Washington was one of the few great men on the planet at that point, and was recognized that way around the world. They knew that George Washington was something very different. You go read his biography. They knew George Washington was cut out of a different piece of cloth. And this man shocked the world on 2 different occasions. One was in 1783, when his commission was up and George Washington went home. The world was sitting there trying to figure out, what was that about? They went right over their head. They didn't know what they had. They had never seen that before. When the persons have a revolution, the guy that defeats the one that's in power, he rides in there and takes over. George Washington went home. They hadn't seen that before. They didn't know what they were looking at. And then, I used to have my students would tell me, George Washington was the first president of the United States. I would tell them, sit down. George Washington is the first president in the history of the world. They had never seen that before. Only kings. This is what Toussaint Louverture was saying. One of his biggest mistakes, in fact, when he was talking to Napoleon. He went over there talking about only kings have been obeyed in the world, and that was true. He went over there and got thrown in a dungeon. But over here, something is going on that's quite different. And George Washington set a precedent of a 2-term limit, where they limit their own power. And as long as that was going on in the tradition, things were going on fairly smoothly. Even, I don't know what Lincoln would have done, because Lincoln was an out-of-the-box dictator, but it would have been interesting to see what Lincoln would have done after 1864. You know, he was elected 2 terms, but he only served a month of his second term, because he would have been installed in office again in 1865, March the 4th, 1865, having been elected in 1864 during the war still going on. And the war was going on even during his inauguration. The war did not end until April of 1865, April the 9th of 1865. So Abraham Lincoln was killed really, really, if you look at the date of his death, he was killed right at the conclusion of the Civil War. But it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if, given how much power he had taken to the presidency, which was not intended, by the way, and that's why many persons now looking at the Lincoln myth, and they're now concluding, as I concluded some years ago, that this man, looking at all the things that he did, and also having read the book by Thomas De Lorenzo called Lincoln Unmasked, and some other books that are coming out that are now showing that there was something going on here that was not intended. This man was a great violator of the Constitution. It would have been interesting to see in peace times what Lincoln would have done if he had lived in terms of the second term, what he would have done in the term thereafter. It's been very interesting to find that out, because I don't see Lincoln as being George Washington. And George Washington had a lot of power concentrated in the Oval Office, but he was able to handle that and to refute to get drunk with it. This idea that Lord Acton, he had the power corrupts, and power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, I don't buy that basically because of George Washington's model. I can't accept that premise, because George Washington had more power than was wielded by any other president in this country, legally, in the history of this country. Legally now, I said legally because Abraham Lincoln wielded more power than any president has ever done in the history of this country. You know who was number two, I mean, in terms of wielding power that was in fact illegal. You know the other ones who's close to him? Woodrow Wilson. And there's a lot of parallels, folks, between Woodrow Wilson and Barack Obama. A lot of parallels. And you need to read Lies My Teacher Told Me, and just read. I don't know if you get through the whole book. It's a great book to read as a counter to the textbook. I read a lot of those books now that I have the training in terms of the textbooks.
By the way, you're a teacher for 39 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of that stuff, I can't say, I mean, I think a lie is a deliberate act. I mean, I basically think they were handed textbooks or material, and they just simply read off of it with full credit, full faith, and that was like to true. So
that's right.
I don't like to, it's misleading to say it's a lie, because they truly expected
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, the accuracy of this title is questionable, because if you think that you are saying that which is true, then you're not lying. You're not speaking the truth, but it doesn't mean that you're lying in the fact that what you're saying is not, accurate. Lying is when you have some consciousness of what you're saying, like these politicians.
I was going to say that. I was going to say that, like the politicians.
Who know. I mean, look, if I said this about posts, I don't like to bite my tongue when I'm writing. That when the president is talking, I said put my bet on horse number 10, Pinocchio, because when this president is talking, it's a sure bet. 9 out of 10, many times 10 out of 10 times, this president's lying. This president is a pathological liar. And so that's different from someone who's given a book, which is another book that they were handed after they finished their degree, and it resembles the book that they had when they were in the college classroom. They were given a book, and they're told to read that to pass a test. And this book that they're given when they get into the classroom and teaching resembles the book, and it talks about the same thing that they had in their training. They're not lying. They're just inaccurate with their teaching. And that's why I had a lot of problems in school, because when I got out of college, I didn't think I was finished with my education. I was reading from other sources, and those other sources was informing my training, and I had a wider view of what I was teaching. And that wider view got me into a lot of trouble. That's what James Herndon was writing about in his book called The Way It's Supposed to Be. S-P-O-Z-E-D. The Way It's Supposed to Be. And I was teaching the way it was not supposed to be, which was this book plus some other reference materials brought into it, not approved by those who were in fact ordaining that it happens this way and not outside of the mix. And when I started going outside the mix, and I was not going into orthodoxy, that's when I began to have trouble. But that's the way that narrative goes on. But see, if I had known this other thing and I was still doing this in a textbook, I would have been in the classroom lying at that point. But when I was teaching from just a textbook, as many of them did, but I stopped doing that after about the third year, because I'm now reading this. I was a reader, so I would read outside of my training, and when I began to get more information, I began to teach more information. And by the way, I had roommates. They would walk out. They would leave out the house in the morning on Saturday, and they come back, and I'd be sitting in the same chair reading. I was studying. And when I walk in the classroom, I had a volume of information. That bell would sound sometimes. I'm looking at the clock like I've been in there 5 minutes. And some of the students would be in my classes at that time, not bragging, but that bell would sound and they wouldn't move. Because I wasn't finished with all, I mean, I told them you can leave. But, and they, in fact, they invited me right now to the class of 1975, told me to make sure I'm there. I'll be there for that reunion because I know why they invited me there. And anyway, the point I'm making is just that I was out of the box at that point because I was not going to go in the classroom and lie. When I was out of the box with things I knew to be true and was saying that to complement what was in the textbook, that's when I began to have problems. Because they would ask me to go in the classroom and only deal with this set of circumstances that was in fact put together in books that they'd approved of and the board had approved of, and I couldn't do that because then I'd be in the classroom lying. Because I knew better than what the book was saying, and I had these other source materials that I could reference. Now, if I had done what they were asking me to do, I would have been in the classroom lying at that point. So I think John made an excellent point. When he writes a book called Lies My Teacher Told Me, I think that John, you made me think about it. That title is a little cumbersome because you're not lying if you don't know any better. I mean, I was lying when I stole some cookies out of the cookie jar. My mama told I had four siblings, and so I didn't think my mom could identify who was stealing the cookies because I had 4 siblings. So why couldn't it be them sometime? It was always me because my mom knew it was me because she knew my habits. But I would have gotten some cookies up there because I just couldn't keep my hand out of the cookie jar because I like sweets. You know what? I don't eat sweets today because of that too, because of the experience I had when my mom visited me. She visited the devil in me. That's why I believe in, when they put the film out called The Exorcism, I believe in exorcism because when my students asked me, Miss Mouse, I saw the movie The Exorcism. Do you believe in exorcism? I said, yes, I do. When I was coming up, my mama told me she was going to beat the devil out of me. And she did. But I was lying because I knew, I was conscious of the fact that I had taken those cookies. And when I was denying that I had taken the cookies, I don't know what kind of look I had on my face when I was lying, but my mom, once I got through talking, then my mom started talking. And my mom was talking with whatever she had in her hand. It wasn't, she'd give me a chance to come clean. And she knew it was me. And as soon as I stopped lying, my mom, after I got through talking, my mom started talking. Because one thing that my mom did not allow her children to do was lie to her. I mean, that hurt her more than the theft. I just fessed up. I mean, I gotten beat down so much. But I had to not only go and steal the cookies, but lie about stealing the cookies. I'm looking down up there, and I couldn't even look at my mom in the eye. She saw that. And as soon as I got through talking, my mom started talking. And so, you know what? I don't like sweets that much even today. Because I have memory of what that meant. And so, yeah, I think it is true that the title is a little off here, is what I'm saying. Lies my teacher told me. The teachers not in the classroom lying. They don't know any better. And that's a problem. Because a lot of them accept their training and do not read after what I found is that they don't do a lot of studying after they get their degree. And when they study again, they're getting another degree. They only study for the degrees. Well, I was trained a little bit differently. I would read, and my roommates would leave the house in the morning on Saturday, come back, leave about 9, and they would come back. I had 2 roommates. They didn't read. One of them was reading. We both had libraries. And they would come back, and they would come in the door, and I'm still sitting in that same chair, and they say, I don't believe this. But I'm sitting there, and I'm concentrating on what I'm reading, and I'm almost memorizing that stuff. And they could not believe that I was doing that. But when I walked in the classroom, it was like on a Saturday, and walked in the classroom on Monday, I was ready for the class. And I would go in that classroom, and magic would happen. I'm not lying. I'm not bragging about it, and I'm not lying about it either. But that's what would happen. And when I stopped doing that, because I stopped being rooted in my profession as much as I was at the very beginning, when I was this excited, ideologically enthusiastic, utopian type of person, I was bringing up the next generation. I was bringing up the leaders. That was my view. That's how they brought me up. And I was trying to bring up those into the future. And I was committed to that. And when they would call me in the office and told me, you're going to go in there and you're going to do X, Y, and Z like the rest of the teachers are doing, and I would tell them, not me. And when they said, yes, you are going to do it, and I told them, before I do it, I'll see you in court. And that's how that played out. I mean, I was surprised I retired out there, because I just couldn't do it. I tried to negotiate. I couldn't. My conscience wouldn't let me do it. That's why I was in so much trouble. But somehow I survived. Somebody was looking out for me. You know what I mean? Somebody looking out for me there. I mean, I was shocked, because I was willing to lose my job over that. I just could not do it. So I don't think it's lies. I think you're right. John's right. These are distortions of consciousness. And they're importing that distortion in the classroom, because that is what they know. They don't know any better than what they know.
Well, see, I always found my experience with people who did well in school, officially well, GPA-wise and all that, not wholesale, but on the average, where people are good at regurgitating from a textbook.
Yeah.
And when you start actually questioning what was in the textbook, or asking them to flesh it out, to answer questions related to that, basically just point to the book, the text.
Yeah.
And that's what's
in the book.
And these are supposed to be teachers, and teachers, I think, it should be to teach kids how to think rather than just to regurgitate information.
Yeah, the point that James Lowen makes in his book is that, when you look at the class that students like, the one that they dislike most is the history class, but yet they watch the History Channel and they love that, and they watch a lot of history programs because it's a little bit more of an extension of what you get in the classroom. And the History Channel is being watched by what? People that hate history in school, because it's so narrowly intended. It's intended that way, to create a certain narrowness in thinking. That's why government requires people to go to school for 12 years. I'll tell you this, what Malinau said too. Another aspect to it, and that is the minimum wage is tied into that. And how's the minimum wage tied into the fact that you're in school for 12 years and you're being narrowly, confined while you're there? The minimum wage is tied into it because what they're hiding there is that you've been in school for 12 years and you come out of school and your training has not taught you to do anything. Your skill level is so low that you're at the minimum wage level. And they're telling you through the $15 an hour that your skill level is up here at $15 an hour now that you come out of high school. Hiding the fact that when you come out, you don't know how to do anything. That's what that minimum wage is about. They're not trying to give you any money in your pocket because they're trying to benefit you. These people are dictators, hidden dictators. And they're hiding that they took 12 years of your life in school, you're finishing at 18, and when you come out, you don't have any skills. To demand a place in the marketplace sufficient with the amount of training you've had in being in school for 12 years. Can you imagine being in school for 12 years and you're coming out and cannot do anything, can't even read? And so they raise the scale up to hide that they put you in there and then narrow what it is that you'll be able to do. That's control. Not about education. And when I broke out of that and was teaching more expansively, then I found out that this is where the information is supposed to be rooted in this, ideology. And when I didn't believe it anymore, I stopped giving out inaccurate information. But I wasn't lying in that time period. I just was doing what my teachers had done. They had done what their teachers had done all the way back to the first one to set this thing up. And we were doing the best we could do under the circumstances. We were doing it the way it was supposed to be. And you ought to read James Herndon's book about that, the way it's supposed to be, because he said that if you walk by a classroom and everybody's got their heads on their desk and you're trying to make what happens, but it's not happening, and the professor walks by your classroom and he sees people in the classroom with their heads on the desk, then that's fine, as long as you're trying to make happen what's supposed to happen. But if he walks by there and everybody got their hands in the air and they're asking questions, they're excited about the lesson, and you're making it happen what's not supposed to happen, then you got a problem on your hands. That's what James Herndon is saying in his book called The Way It's Supposed to Be. And it took me a while to understand that was a going rate, and that's why I was in so much trouble. But I could, if I knew better and were not teaching it better, then I would have been lying. And John made an excellent point there. Let me end this before we get off the air here. And that is, the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office upon impeachment for Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. Impeachment takes place in the House. The House has the sole power of impeachment. And then once the impeachment happens through a majority vote in the House, then you have the matter referred to the Senate, where it goes over there for the trial on the impeachment charges. And that's why Article 2, Section 4 says, upon impeachment for and conviction of. Conviction must take place in the Senate. And if he's impeached in the House and then convicted in the Senate, then that person is removed from office. And if you have a government leader that's involved in treason, the Constitution, which recognized that possibility, gave a way out of dealing with it. But it never saw that the treason would extend beyond the individual to the government in general itself. And that's where we are right now. And have to look out for that at this time. We're on the road to tyranny, and we've got to get off that road. And we can do something about it underneath the umbrella if we understand where we are and what we're doing right now. Okay, that's all I have time to say today, but I will be talking about this issue next week as well. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.